Hello and welcome to another episode of the Runes of Aereal's Dev Log. So what I've been up to lately, well, one of the more important features I have added recently is something extra in the sandbox really. As you can see on my screen, I've added a preferred next action. So whenever we spawn an enemy, normally the next action the enemy is going to take, like do damage or cast a spell or whatever, is reasonably by random, by chance. And if I want to debug a certain behavior, actually, it's hard to do. So what I did is I've added some extra logic to be able to do that. So I've added something here I've called PNA for preferred next action. This is some settings where you can see that I've added shield to these two enemies, and there are actually 4 different possibilities, being damage, strong, feeble, and shield. Actually, it's not on here, but shield is the 4th possibility, the 5th possibility. That brings us to the next 2 things I've added in this run. Here is the Scarecrow possibility and the shield possibility. So how this works here, this preferred next action, I've let me go back to the interface here, and you can see here that I've added those boxes, and I've called them CDE1 PNA, CDE2 PNA, etc. PNA for short for preferred next action. And what I do actually here in the sandbox is in this function where we create the current combat definition, where it's stored what enemies should be spawned. Actually, I've added another input here, the underscore PNA, as you can see here, and I've added something here in the current combat definition called preferred next action. This is an extra item in the JSON definition, preferred next action, which should be one of those 5 values here: damage, strong. And if we leave it empty, then it behaves just like always. It's a random behavior based on the randomized tables. So what happens actually, there is in the determine strategy function, here we've added an extra logic where we say, okay, when the preferred next action of the enemy, and I've added for the so in this function I've added an extra logic where I say that when the preferred next action of an enemy, and for enemies I've added a preferred next action instance variable, when it's empty or set to 0, then we just do it as always. The choice between having damage or having a spell is really depending on the weighted variable of the advanced random plugin. If it's set to damage, then we're going to attack anyway, and if it's not empty and it's different from damage, we're going to defend. And then based on attack, of course, we're going to do some damage. And based on defend, at that time, we need to determine the next action, not longer based on only the advanced random weighted of the probability table called spells. But if it's empty, of course, then we do that. It's just a preferred action from the advanced random plugin. But if it's not empty, we check for one of these 4 other values, and then we set this next action to one of these values here, and then of course we need to set the next value, which is just basically randomized. And what is done then, if we go to the enemies here and we go to the spawn enemy here, what we just do is we set the next preferred action to the preferred action of we set the next preferred action of that enemy here, so it can be read in the determine strategy. That's basically it. So this is the full loop of the next preferred action, and this brings me to the next thing that I've added, and that's a Scarecrow card. So if we go to the cards here, I've added this Scarecrow card. And this Scarecrow card is an unplayable card. And it does absolutely nothing. It can only be removed from your deck. So it's something that the enemy can do. It can, as a kind of a curse, it adds a curse card. So it's added to your deck, and if you get your cards dealt, basically there's nothing you can do with that card. So essentially, instead of 5 cards, you only get dealt like 4 cards. Or if you have 2 Scarecrow cards in your deck, you only get dealt 3 cards until you remove them from your deck somehow. So that's a Scarecrow card. And so you can see here in the definition, we've marked this as unplayable, and all the other things here are 0. So it can't do anything, 0, but it is unplayable basically. So then what we do there in enemy attack, let me go to the command functions here. For the enemy attack command function, then we see, okay, if the next action is Scarecrow, then we create a card called Scarecrow. But it shouldn't be created just like that. It shouldn't be added to your hand, because your hand at that time is not visible, because it's the enemy playing a card. So instead, it's like an animation that's going to play. And instead of talking about it, I'm just going to show you by calling the PNE here instead of shield. I'm going to call it Scarecrow, like that. And let me just start the game to show you how exactly that works. So these are 2 enemies being spawned, and just to show the effect, I'm just going to end my turn.
Enemy turn. Your turn.
See, what happened is I got dealt 2 Scarecrow cards, of course, because my preferred next action was to deal a Scarecrow card. And instead of adding it to my hand, because there was no hand at the moment, it got some animation where we showed the Scarecrow card, and then it was dealt to the left deck here, so it could be placed onto my hand the next time it was my turn. So doing that, essentially, what it does is it creates the card. We flag it as a temporary card, and we set the position to the enemy position, basically. We disable the effect called grayscale to see the full effect of the card, actually. We remember the original width and height, and what we do is actually tween the opacity in, we tween the scale into 1, and we tween the position in to the center of the screen, layout width but divided by 2 and layout height divided by 2. And we play this sound, spell 60. And then actually what happens, we see here that I've given these tween names meaningful names: flash preview opacity, flash preview scale, flash preview position. So what we do here in this flash preview scale finished tween, you can find it in the layout sheet of a card actually. We set the timer object target card instance variable to the card we're playing. It's just a way of remembering what card has been placed in the middle of the screen. And then we start a little timer to wait about half a second. And when that timer finished, we pick immediately that card that was placed to the target card here. And then we tween back the opacity, we tween back the width and the height to the original width and height that was just set. And we tween the position towards the left deck. And whenever this is finished, we stop executing and we enable the grayscale effect. So that's what happens when we play that Scarecrow card. The second enemy spell I've added was the shield effect. So again, in the determined strategy here, I've added this shield item to set the next action to shield, and also to have some next value which I start at a value between 1 and 10 actually. Also in enemy attack we do something similar, where if the next action is shield, then we add some shield, we show an exclamation saying, okay, I've added some shield, and we play a sound. So let me show you what that looks like. Let's do, again, call that PNA, but you can see shield has been added here.
Fight.
So that, here we go, just end the turn.
Enemy turn. Your turn.
They get shield. That's basically it. So also what I've done is little tweaks. For example, I've set the intent amount of damage based on the experience. So the higher the experience, the higher the intent amount, to make it a little bit more difficult, because I found that it was very, very simple to beat those enemies. And in order to make it a bit more difficult to beat the game, this has been done now based on experience, of course, and later versions will go and make this even more intricate to have a more smooth experience, more difficult experience whenever we play the game. So two more things, small things basically. What I've done is in the variables, we have now a total seconds played and a battle seconds played. And what we do here on start battle, let me just start battle, is a function that's called, of course, when we start the battle. We start a battle timer basically, and this battle timer just goes for 1 second repeatedly, and every second here on timer we just add 1 to these total second, battle seconds. Total seconds primarily because we want to track as a kind of a statistic how many time we've spent battling, as a kind of a statistic, and also to keep track of the timing of the current battle as well. So we stop the timer effectively when we check for a victory and we see that all players are dead. Basically, when we generate a loot, we stop the battle timer. Basically, that's it. And how does that represent itself? Well, actually, on every tick, let me just call that again. On every tick of the game, we set at the bottom right of the interface, we set the number of turns that have passed. And we also set the number of cards that were played. And plus, what happens now is we just display this time as well. So displaying that time actually happens on an every tick. Let's see where this happens here. We're going to add a new line here, and then we call a function I've created called seconds to text. I've created this in the logic here, and seconds to text is just you give it a seconds, a parameter, and it returns a string that does this little function to make it seem nice, like minutes and seconds and stuff like that. So that's what I did. And the last thing is like a quality of life thing in the interaction. I made it so that if I press the space bar, then we can switch to we can end the turn basically whenever we switch the space bar. And also if I press a C wherever we're in a mode for scrolls, we go to the cards, C for cards, and whenever we're dealing cards, we're actually pressing the S, and I see this is too much here, we go to the scrolls basically. So these are keyboard shortcuts I've added. And let's just, whatever. I don't know if I've got scrolls in this predefined one. Yes, I've got 4 scrolls.
Fight.
So we press the S for scrolls, we press the C for cards, and now we press the space bar to end our turn.
Enemy turn. Your turn.
So that's it. That's the progress. As always, please like and subscribe. And if you want the full source code of this game, make sure to support me on my Patreon page. The link is in the description. Bye-bye.